Okay, maybe we can just start by introducing ourselves. So I'll go first. I'm Anthony Silverstone, Head of Development at Triggerfish. Over to you, Stu.
I'm Stuart Forrest. I'm the CEO of Triggerfish Animation.
And Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Sinden. I'm a producer. I've been working in live action for the last 20 years and in animation for the last 13 years, and I've been doing a lot of development work and producing work at Triggerfish.
And then most recently joining us, Tendai.
Tendai Nyeke, development producer at Triggerfish, background in public broadcasting and animation now.
So we have all been asked to talk about diversity. It seems like the world is suddenly waking up to this term, the whole concept. But at Triggerfish, it's been something we've been grappling with or talking about since the beginning, it seems like. So why do you think that is? Maybe any of you, but maybe Stu?
Yeah, so I think full disclosure, we're a 5 white male led company. We're 25 years old, and we started Triggerfish in 1996. Actually started by 2 females, and then we gradually built up the team over the years, and it just tended to be, we were less kind of thinking about diversity as we built the core team, but it's become something we've been thinking of more and more. But in South Africa, we started 1996, just after the end of apartheid, on paper at least, and but we've been exposed to these issues of diversity, representation our entire lives, as we've just always been aware of the fact of discrimination and biases and prejudices, and what that and the systemic results of all that that does to the workplace. So even though we've been slow to the take and we still have a long way to go, it's something that we've started to acknowledge a few years ago, and started to really dig into how we can address it, as slow as it is. We've been doing this for about 6 or 7 years, really seriously.
I just wanted to add that I think living in South Africa, there are so many different cultures. We've got 11 official languages. There are way more cultural groups than 11 that are represented in South Africa. And then when you look at the continent, gosh, it's so uniquely diverse. And just being on the continent really just requires us to look at ourselves and go, what is being represented? What are the stories that are being told? How are we being represented to the world? And that just makes you question, what are we producing? What are we spending time developing? And I think it's been such a wonderful journey. Also just seeing how many women are in this space, and how women's stories are being told, and what content has strong female lead voices in. So it's been really great facing all of these questions, and then trying to take small steps to change that, and to make us and the stories we tell more diverse.
I mean, tonight, I don't know if you've got anything to add from your background in public broadcasting. Lots.
Yeah, I think, having worked in public broadcasting for 5 years, and done some study on it, and the role that public broadcasters just have in the world in terms of reflecting back the population of wherever the public broadcaster is based. There's always conversations around the quality of programming and money and all of that, but globally, BBC, ABC, ZBC, SABC, the mandate is going, who are our people? Who lives in the place that we exist in? And how are they represented in the storytelling? And I think it shouldn't be a responsibility of a public broadcaster only, right? Like in every creative industry, I think it's important to reflect back the people around us. So, I mean, even just this whole question around diversity for me is like, it's like a mandate, but it's the way the world should be, where we're having conversations with everybody, and we're reflecting everybody, because I think the way people view themselves is very much informed by the art they consume and stuff that they consume and stuff that we consume. And so if ourselves isn't represented in the work, how do you view yourself? How do you form an opinion of yourself? So that's something that I think I've taken from public broadcasting, that it's just important to be inclusive of the different voices.
I think it's very much, I mean, you know, it's our vision as a studio, as a company, is to showcase underrepresented voices. And I guess that comes from the stories we tell, but also the talent to make those stories, films. And I do feel like, you know, our content has been kind of children skewed. And that's partly because I guess, I know for myself, like growing up, I didn't feel represented on screen. You know, because it's not just race, it's sexual orientation, it's other things as well. And I did feel like that importance to normalize everyone, essentially, because I didn't feel normal. And so I think now the world is realizing that, you know, the whole of Africa kind of hasn't been represented. So that's really nice for us, because those are the stories we're trying to tell. So, I mean, maybe shifting to some of those specific opportunities and challenges of working from Africa, what do you think sets us apart or holds us back? Anyone?
I think I can speak from a Black female perspective. So some of the challenges are, generally speaking, across the world, women are not necessarily prioritized. And I think just in the evolution of identity and race and cultures and whatever, it's a particular challenge on the continent as a Black female, right? Telling stories. And the culture I come from, it's very much the men talk, the men do the talking and stuff like that. And then you're in a room now where you're trying to convey stories and maybe even lead a team and get ideas coming out, and you're a female, and it's navigating the different perceptions, the different cultures and stuff like that. So it comes with challenges, but I think when people start to see the value in that, there's a lot of buy-in. So I think it's just coming in armed and appreciative that there's so many different views, right? So that's the other part, that even within Africa, I may be Black female, but Black female in Zimbabwe and Black female in Nigeria are completely different things. And if you start there and going, how do I build a bridge across this difference and get a conversation going and work together with people that are different from me, that's already a starting point. So that's a challenge. But the benefit is that you actually start to see how much in common we have, even though we may look at things through different lenses. So yeah, that's my view on it.
I also think, just as women in animation or women in creative industries, I think statistically around the world, there are certain figures that just show that a lot of women are studying and are interested in career paths in creative industries. And actually in the workplace, it just is it's so skewed. So maybe 60% of women are studying in creative spaces, but only 20% are actually working in that space. And I think it's made a lot of companies just stop and think, well, why is that? And as a woman in this industry, just to be able to have conversations, and there are some online conversations like African Women in Animation, currently 750 online members, just talking about like, why is that? Why do you feel as a woman you've not had an opportunity to work in animation, to work and make your own films, to direct films, to write in series? And so it's been such a wonderful journey trying to figure out, well, why are women not represented in this space, and take some small steps to try and rectify that, and really just open up a door, give those women an opportunity, which we'll get to in a sec, is probably talk about all those projects that we've been involved in over the years. But it's been so wonderful to see women go, gosh, this is my story, this is my perspective, and actually to be in conversations where it's quite clear that this story needs a female perspective, and to stop there and go, well, where are the female writers in this room? Oh, there are none. Okay, well, let's start there. Let's make sure that there's a perspective shared in the room for whichever the story is being told.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from a perspective of management and running a studio, a lot of the decisions that we've made over the last years have been practical. It's been like, oh, if we do this, we could get money from this and we could figure out our way through it. But in retrospect, looking back, we have a much richer creative pool to draw from. We have different point of views. We have different representation. We are a more interesting, more successful and more creative company because we have more diversity in our storytelling. And where we started Triggerfish, or when we really had the first vision, it was to create our own movies, and we weren't really thinking much beyond our own interests. Now our interests have been, magnified. We're far more interested in bringing other people's voices because we can then, get so much more out of it, and the world is asking for it too. So that's a big plus. So there's huge benefits that beyond the social justice of it all, that it is actually a stronger, to make a stronger, more creative company.
So, I mean, because if we separate out the different departments in a way, because there's Triggerfish Animation, the studio, and I feel like, there's the diversity challenge there. But I remember being asked once when I was in Annecy about, like, how do we deal with the, lack of women in animation? And I was like, well, we had 10 interns, like 9 of which were female. So it just happens naturally because there are more females interested in animation now. So it wasn't something we had to actively change. But then, in terms of non-whites, it was a problem because of a lack of funding, right? So maybe Stu, you can talk about, this kind of the bursary program and the academy and all of that, because I feel like we had to keep going back one step further to really deal with the problem.
Yeah, well, in South Africa, we're very aware of the transformation, and it's tied into our incentives. So the film incentives are linked into this agenda. So we've set up things that we probably wouldn't have come to naturally in another environment to do, with bursary programs and training programs. We have an academy and different things that can address these issues. And again, even though we were kind of forced into it, the benefits that we're seeing, even 5 years later, are tangible and real. So it definitely helps to do, not just look at the balance sheet in front of you, but to say, how do we invest in the future, because it will pay off in 5 years, and we've seen that now.
It is it's a slow build though, right? Because, I mean, as far as I understand, one of the bursary students now, he's in his 3rd year, so we've had to support 3 years, right, to get him all the way through. And then, we have the internship, so it's another year upon site training. So it is slow with animation, I guess, as well.
It's got don't you think it's also got a compound effect, which is the beauty of like the industry that we're in that if there is one Black project lead, for example, whatever project lead, they bring in other people, right? So because animation is so team, that guy, when he graduates, is able to pull in other people in his network, and there's a multiplication effect. And we're not necessarily going to be hands-on all the time. It just kind of multiplies itself. And it's also then building a culture of developing, because if you're the recipient of a, a leg up, I think it just does something to you where you want to do that for other people, and it kind of duplicates itself. So I think it's a slow build maybe in the foundational period. And then I think we're going to start seeing a multiplication. But I also wanted to just comment on your, it's automatic, and maybe you're going to get to this, but in some instances it isn't, right? Where it requires intentionality. And I know in the projects we're doing, Anthony, you and I, you actually have to go look for these voices, and in some cases, even across industries, right? And going, you've got a transferable skill that can come into here. Have you considered? And it's just opening people's minds to other opportunities that maybe they didn't even consider, and inviting them in. So it's both, right? That is intentional as well.
So maybe, I mean, to qualify, like, I think what I meant was, if it is there, it's automatic. And that's what was so great about the fact that at our local animation schools, we had 9, females available for an internship. But maybe to segue into the intentional aspect of this, because we've had to be quite intentional in quite a few ways. I think, you know, the Story Lab is probably the biggest kind of thing we ran back in 2015, which was specifically to try and get new writers and directors into animation. And that was a massive program. I mean, we ran this kind of call for projects from across the continent because we realized we wanted to be bigger than just South Africa. And like that was hard to like, we had to try and reach further than we had before. But still, I mean, it was mostly white male, mostly. And we also realized that we'd focused on writers because, you know, we thought that's where the story starts. But then we realized we had to also get directors because they drive the project. So then we had to, you know, think of other ways. So it's like we have to be so intentional in so many different ways to reach everyone. Maybe, yeah, I mean, to talk about that, Vanessa, you were quite integral in the Story Lab. Maybe just a quick summary of what it was.
Yeah, gosh. And so in 2015, it was just Triggerfish's desire to, as Anthony mentioned, to find new storytellers and to give them an opportunity, link them to something that was backed by Disney, and to give them an opportunity to craft their skills and to pitch in a way that they'd never pitched their projects before, with the hope of then going into development and then actually finding funds to produce their TV series, their feature films. And 1,400 people applied from the continent, to the point where we were able to break that down to 35 creatives in workshop environments over 2 weeks, working with Disney, working with script gurus. It was such an amazing process to be able to incubate and to allow people just the freedom to pitch their stories, craft their stories. We added a whole lot of concept artists into the mix and said, well, let's start thinking about what this world could look like and what these characters look like. And we supported those creators with an opportunity to start shaping their pitches for the first time. For many of them, the first time, and for many, the first time in animation. And really the seeds from that program are just exponential. You know, we've seen multiple women, multiple people pitch at least 5 or so other projects after the Story Lab, where the seed of this lab had intentionality to produce TV series and feature film, but those people that maybe didn't get selected to the top few went on to do so much more. And some of the projects we're excited about from the Story Lab was Mama K's Team 4, which was by creator Malenga Mulindema from Zambia, where her key focus was to have a superhero TV series with strong female leads based in Lusaka, Zambia, because she'd never seen that growing up. She never saw herself on screen. She never saw strong Black women, young teenagers with great hair that she looked like her, that represented her, sounded like her. And that's something that's shared across the continent, where as young Black women, there's just not been content to show who they are. And then I think if you see yourself on screen, you believe that you actually, as a young girl, this is something be. So for this series, they were programmers, they were engineers, they've been, you know, saving the world on a budget, and how exciting to see yourself as a superhero for the first time. And many of the projects as well had similar spin-offs where they've gone on into development and have been picked up. So gosh, the Story Lab was phenomenal, and it was really just a seed of an idea of Triggerfish, and what a privilege to be a part of it, because a lot of it just moved by itself. I think encourage creators, they need to drive their projects, because there's people who want to hear their stories, there's people who want to invest in their stories, and they've just got to keep going and have 10 other ideas if the first one doesn't get accepted, you know.
And so I think to Tendai's point earlier, like then because Malenga became this visible creator of an animation series, it really did attract a lot of interest. And we've had a lot of people like then coming to us with their ideas, which they might not have before, which is great. And so then maybe just leading on to then with Mama K's, you know, I think Netflix were very intentional again about then creating an all-female Black writers' room, which was a first. And so what we did was we put a call out for writers. We got 750 applicants. which was amazing. Only about half actually had writing samples. You know, we did realize we needed to get people who had experience already. We went to Lusaka with the top 12. And actually, even to get there, we realized, you know, a lot of the writers in Africa have been writing soap operas, dramas. None have written animation. Not many have written comedy. So we had to get the sample scope. Anyway, we got back down to the 12, and we went through an amazing workshop there. And now all of those writers, we still, you know, looking at working with them on other projects. They're pitching concepts. So it has from that.
And kudos to Netflix and kudos to partners who are prepared to take risk, who have a big appetite for risk, because and I actually don't see it as risk, but for them, I think all that money invested in something that has not been tested is risk in a business sense. But essentially, an all-female writers' room from the continent, an all-Black females writers' room has never been done before. Our head writer in LA, who worked and was head writer on the Powerpuff Girls, had never been in an all-female writers' room before, so it was a first for her. And that just like breaks open the opportunities for women in the animation writing space, which was powerful to see. And I think when we saw the scripts come out, it was so fresh and exciting. You know, we did a comedy polish to just amp up the comedy, but the skills are there, the writing is there, and the scripts are fresh. And I think if people lean into like trusting that the writer's voice will come through and it's exciting, I think like that's such low risk actually. You know, it was on paper, it was amazing, and I can't wait for you all to see it on screen. But that,
so I mean, I think Tendai, when we were chatting once, you were saying there is a cost to development and to training. So that's, you know, it's great when you have partners who have that cost appetite. But yeah, I mean, do you want to maybe just talk about that a bit? The challenge, I guess, of training development.
It's time consuming, right? And I think you really do have to have a conviction for it. And so, I mean, I've seen a lot in my career in terms of the exploitation of this even. It's profitable, right? So it's the current trend. In public broadcasting, there was a point, and even in commercial broadcasting, there was a point when broadcasters saw that there's a cap at a premium audience or a paying audience, right? So you gotta branch out. The Black middle class increases, you know, people of color have, you know, disposable income has increased. So of course it makes commercial sense to deliver content that reflects, so there's a profitable piece to it. So from a business perspective, it's worth investing in at that level. It's like providing a product, understanding your market, right? So you're delivering a product to there. So it costs money, right? It costs money to teach, it costs money. And sometimes the payoff, just like in anything, isn't immediate. And sometimes you don't do well. There's a bit of trial and error, but it is worth it, right? Because like I said earlier, this is the world that we live in. So if you don't mirror the world that we live in, you're falling behind. And I do think on the cost piece, I mean, earlier you were talking about how there was a stage in which the company was looking at opportunities, like, and I'm assuming you're talking about the grants and rebates and things like that, right? And I think there are clever ways to make that work in your favor. And I think one thing that Triggerfish does well is not hoarding all the projects. So people obviously come to Triggerfish and pitch, right? Because we're visible. But I think there's a piece where we actually empower. So we'll go, okay, how can we support your company? Not everything has to be produced here. So there's empowerment happening in that way. Stuart, I know you get calls all the time, and you can speak for yourself on like, how do I make a commercially successful company? So there's so many ways that don't have to cost you as a business individually. And sometimes it's as simple as your time and a conversation with a business-minded person or a creative, and you do this all the time as well, giving notes for free, stuff like that. So there's clever ways. It doesn't always have to be.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. And one of those ways is the foundation that we set up. We realized we couldn't afford to take off our balance sheet and invest into the industry for the 10 years and the 20-year vision. So we set up a foundation. We went out to different stakeholders. NBC Universal were big contributors, Disney, and several others, Toon Boom. So we went to the stakeholders and said, would you help us to invest in the development of the African animation industry? And we had a lot of yeses and a lot of money come through. And now with the Goethe Institute and GIZ, we have the foundation is funded for the next 3 years with quite ambitious plans to develop and build off that platform. So it doesn't have to cost you directly. We had to just front the cost of the person who spent 3 years raising the money because it takes time. But once that's in place, then it kind of pays for itself and the work is done, and we get the benefit of all these new people that are being trained as well. So it starts to pay deeper dividends.
So I wanted to just add, sorry, Anne, I wanted to add just to what Tendai was saying about the cost of opening up doors and giving new voices and new talent an opportunity in the industry. Like we're seeing it at a certain level. We're seeing it pitches being, projects being actually pitched out, writers, but we're not seeing it in key crew, like directors, art directors. And so projects I've been working on, I'm like, where is the diversity here? Where are the women in this space? And I really wonder how women will get an opportunity unless, you're investing in women to come through, accelerate through production, accelerate actually working on a production, actually working in storyboarding, actually being in the animation director's seat and having these opportunities. And I just don't see women getting these opportunities, lack of experience, lack of confidence, maybe lack of opportunity. But like, I feel like that needs to be built into all our projects as well, where key crew from certain departments are acknowledged that we're going to accelerate them because there's potential. Their goal is to art direct, write at some point in the future and give them that opportunity. But that takes money, that takes time while you're in production. So it's definitely something that has to be factored in.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if I think about the sort of unique aspect of animation is that, yes, you only work on one project for 3 years and there's one director maybe or two max. But there's like 150 crew underneath there. And so, like with Mama Caves now, we're doing voice work from across Africa. So all these people who haven't had many opportunities to do animated voiceovers are now getting that chance. So it's like, I think with each project that we managed to get into production, we're allowing many more opportunities for that transformation to actually happen. When we're doing a short film now, directed by a female, and so it's like, if we hadn't managed to get that going, when would her next chance have been to direct something? But yeah, maybe just to go, one of the things I picked up on earlier was the sort of that director is like that's the key person that's going to drive that project, right? Like we first tackled writers. There's also concept artists, but the directors, I think, because it's so much responsibility, it's really hard to give someone that opportunity. And what is nice at the moment in the trends of content creation is that shorts are becoming more feasible. So, I mean, Tendai, you joined because of a big shorts anthology we're doing. And you can talk about that, but maybe just to start with that issue of, say, female directors. Like we tried to get female directors in, but the ones that had experience were all busy. And so it's like we have to keep going further back and kind of tackling everything in multiple ways. So yeah, maybe just if you can talk about that project a little bit in terms of the director training at least.
Yeah, look, I think it's, man, it's advocates too, and like it's not just, so I'm the project lead on it, right? And so I think it's just always reminding the team around you to not forget like the intention of whatever you're doing, right? So if the truth of the matter is what Vanessa said, and that there's not a lot of, number one, we're not seeing heads of departments that are diverse enough because they just haven't had the experience. So any business person is going to lower their risk and hire a person with experience, right? And so to your earlier point about helping people get experience, so you maybe start with the lab, and then they maybe do a short film, and then they maybe get more responsibility on a feature film and so on. So there's a training arc, and we've had conversations about this informally in that how do we spot talent within different projects that we're doing and find a path of growth for them and help them and support them. So when it comes to this slate that we're doing of shorts, there definitely has been a training piece. It was a battle to find experienced females, and there's a few of them. But what we did was trying to inject a female perspective in different roles, even if it wasn't directing, and so that they could have sight of directing, and maybe we'll grow some ambition for that. Like for me, I never imagined directing an animation short, but I've had sight of it. And now I'm like, okay, I know what's involved. Yeah, not for me, I'd rather produce, thanks, or whatever it is. So I think it's just about making sure that there's females in the room, females as part of the teams, and giving them access to these things. And I think eventually, so maybe when we do volume 2, we'll have a higher population. Maybe the women will move from concept artists to maybe directing, or writing to maybe something else, and so on. So it's been hard, but it's a work in progress, and you have to have a long game view, not a short term view.
Yeah.
And the power, I feel like the power, you know, as Triggerfish, we were investing in so many areas, from grassroots all the way to development, and your team on the ground, hands-on mentoring, supporting, opening up doors. I don't know who's watching this, but in the audience, there must be some really influential people. But like, I think the key part of this are the streaming partners, the broadcasters, the big studios who essentially have money to invest in studios like us, in companies that are thinking this way, and actually invest in these programs, at these labs, these opportunities for short films, because money for short films, you know, in itself is risky, you know, like what are the returns on short films? But it really is the platform and the space for young talent to get that experience. And it's essential to any growing, diverse animation industry. So yeah, I hope they're listening, and they really are the key that unlocks. You can take talent to the door, you can give an opportunity and come alongside them, but to unlock it is really just money and investors with appetite for risk.
Yeah, it's a good place to end, probably, because I mean, really the summary is that it's expensive, it takes a long time, but it's actually also a great business plan, and it's important because, like Tendai said, it's like we need to reflect the world around us, and yeah, I think we're doing well at Triggerfish. I think it's like, you know, our first few films were all animals, but after that, I mean, they're all mostly actually African female led, and that's going to be so great to contribute that to the world. That's what excites me.
And I think to anybody else listening, running a studio, you know, ask for help. We've been to Disney, we've been to Netflix, we're working with other big studios and streaming services, and they're all looking for the same thing, and they've really been willing to help. So I think if you've got the intention and you see it as a vision, you know, make someone in your company a champion for this cause, because you need to be reminded, and then ask for help, get some other people to come in, and it can be done.
Can I say something quickly?
Oh,
Just my parting thought would be as well, as someone who was a freelancer for a long time, is that sometimes you look at the companies like Triggerfish, and it's like South Africa's biggest animation studio, and that's the only way you get it done. No, it's not the only way you get it done. There's so many ways companies can be structured based on the individuals in them and the strengths in them. So I think it's about finding your magic and making it work for you. And in the little partnerships we've made with smaller companies, it's been fruitful. I mean, I won't mention who, but there's one partnership with a company that we have where it's a very lean company, and it's 2 people, but they're making moves in the industry. So it doesn't have to be a big company doing these things. You can be effective and impactful within the structure and whatever you have, and you just grow from there.
By getting the right people around you, I think, which is, yeah, I mean, it's like, without being facetious, it's like, I think what's working so well with us now is I really do think we've managed to gather a great team with all of you and the others not on the call. But thanks. I think we've probably run out of time anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Let you go back to me.
Thanks for listening.
Okay.
Ha.
Thanks.